LawrenceHits.com, it's Jay Walks, and joining us today in studio is County Commissioner Nancy Thellman, and we are here today to talk about the countywide sales tax initiative known as Proposition 1. This is a mouthful, to say the very least.
Well, I have to say that the County Commission doesn't take any credit for that particular name. That was a name chosen by our county clerk, Jamie Shue, and whatever he does, in my opinion, is just right. So Proposition 1 it is.
Absolutely. The Douglas County Commission is proposing a half-cent sales tax to fund substantial improvements to mental health and substance use disorder services for Lawrence, Eudora, Baldwin, Lecompton, and all 9 of our Douglas County townships, and in addition to that, finance the improvement and expansion of our county jail. Why are these two issues merged like this?
Yeah, well, that's a very good and timely question. That has been kind of an undercurrent of angst around this referendum from, and even just the conversations we've had at the county for a long time, for years now, in fact. Early on, when we started this conversation at the county, it started with the Sheriff McGovern coming to the County Commission, actually for the third time over a number of years. He came to us about 5 years ago for the third time. 2 different commissions. For us, it was the second time, but he came to us finally with a fairly urgent request that the jail was not just overcrowded, but overflowing with inmates, even after some programming to help remove some of the inmates safely out of the jail to their homes. And he really laid it out for us that the jail was in an untenable position, and it's the Commission's responsibility to address that. So we began the jail conversation and began preliminary studies and design work to see what we were actually facing. And almost at the same time, we also decided that we weren't going to address the jail if we didn't also address the mental health needs of our community, which have been vastly underfunded for years by the state. So for us, we undertook a very serious effort, and now for years, to see what we could do for the whole community. This is not just a jail thing. This is an all-community effort at mental health. So we added the mental health angle, the mental health service needs, to our efforts to improve our jails. So they're 2 separate efforts, 2 separate facilities, but they can be covered in one funding mechanism.
Sure.
So it's not an effort to trick people into voting for the jail or to dangle something in front of them that they want. It's 2 genuinely needed initiatives, 2 projects, and we can do more than one thing at a time. So
a half-cent sales tax would bring in roughly how much money?
$9.8 million every year.
Okay.
Just to the county. No, none of that goes to the cities.
But it is my understanding that we don't need $9.8 million a year for either the jail project or the mental health project, but together the needs would be about $9.8 million a year.
Yeah, and that's the calculation we made when we finally had before us all of the costs and an understanding of what it would take to expand the jail and in a different project to create a mental health crisis center with vastly improved and expanded services. Together, combined, that represents about $9.8 million of cost to the county. Less than half of it, about 40% of it, would go to the jail expansion, and more than half, about 60%, goes to the mental health side. And that half-cent sales tax, that half penny, is almost enough to cover both. So that to us is a good
It's a symbiotic relationship. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah,
So how tough is it to get a half-cent sales tax on the ballot for consideration?
It's not easy.
I didn't think it would be.
It takes the action of the legislature, and I think that's an important question because a lot of folks, I think, believe that the county can just put something on the ballot, without any outside concerns or permission. We do not have, the county does not have the authority to have an election when it comes to raising sales tax. We are not allowed to take on debt, large debt, without the permission of the legislature giving us permission to have an election. So it's a multi-step process. It assumes that the legislature will even take our resolution, our statutory request, and it assumes that they will say yes. So
was this done on the first time, or did you have to go back a couple of times to get it done?
It was, the legislature approved this, made it law, frankly, in 2015 with the first request. And that first request was quite different than what we are. The first request allowed much more than just the jail expansion or the mental health crisis center. The original enabling legislation also would have allowed the renovation of our historic Douglas County Courthouse, would have allowed for the construction of more administrative offices because we are packed in there like sardines, and various other needs that the county foresees that it has. What we have now, so we have permission for all of those things to be on a ballot, but we removed those extraneous, important but extraneous projects.
Would you call it prioritization?
Yeah, we prioritized two things. One, we know for a fact that we have a jail that it no longer meets the needs that the population is supposed to serve. It's both overcrowded and it doesn't meet the standards of being safe, secure, sufficient, humane, healthy, all of those things, the standards that we're held to. It's it's not crumbling. It's a good, strong building and it's clean, but the women's housing is vastly inequitable to the women, and mixing of violent and nonviolent inmates, on and on and on. Maybe we can talk about that as well. But
sure.
The long and short of it is that it takes a lot of effort to get the legislature to give the permission for the county to take on this election, which is what gives us the ability to take on debt.
Okay.
And that taking on debt is the only way we're able to fund both projects. This is, for the county, this has always been a both and proposition. It's never been either or. And that's, the either or idea has gotten a lot of traction because it's a natural thing for folks to want to have the option to choose the one thing they like and deny the one thing they don't like. An either or option would do that. But the fact of the matter is the county's obligation is to make sure it's providing a county jail. By state statute, we have to do that. We need a county jail that meets the needs of its community, and ours does not do that at this point in terms of population and conditions.
Well,
so the either or choice is really a false narrative out there. For the county, it has always been a both and. We can do both of these projects, different projects, at once with this one funding stream.
From an outsider's viewpoint, it seems like an odd pairing because a perception is possible that the jail and law enforcement will be administrating mental health. But that is not the case in this issue, correct?
Right. No, that's a completely errant view of this. The jail expansion is an entirely separate project, and the construction of a mental health crisis center with 3 levels of housing and lots of millions of dollars of new services and staff to provide 24-hour a day, 7-day a week, 365 days a year care throughout the county. That's a whole separate facility. That's
Right.
located by the hospital in Burt Nash on the kind of the medical campus we have there by the hospital. So it's not the jail doesn't feed into the crisis center. We know for a fact that crisis centers do not significantly change the population of the jail, but we do. If we can do things right, we feel like we might be able to help folks. In more on the preventive side, help them,
Sure.
maybe capture them and help them, provide them services so that they don't get into the kind of trouble that they might land in jail. It's one more tool to help the community be healthier, have a better quality of life, and all the things we want. But it is not the magic silver bullet that
Right.
will solve our jail.
So
overcrowding.
just to be crystal clear and
Yeah.
make sure I understand, these are two separate and distinct initiatives that only come together for the sake of a funding proposition. That's
Exactly.
the only reason why these two issues are together.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. These are two separate projects.
And this isn't the first time. There's a precedent for this. Let's talk about 1994. In 1994, this was the year that the current jail was paid for by a similar ballot initiative, which also funded the Community Health Center, which houses Burt Nash, which is our mental
Right.
health facility, and Parks and Recreation. So we've already done this. We've been down this road, right?
Yes, absolutely. There's the ballot in '94. Yeah, it wasn't just Burt Nash, the mental health center, and a new jail. It was also Parks and Recreation, a swimming pool, some property tax relief, and various other things. It was a 1-cent sales tax that gave money to the city and the county.
See, and I have to tell you, having not lived here in 1994, I was not aware of
Right,
that
right.
until I did the research
Right.
and found out that there is a precedent.
Right.
But I got to throw you a hardball question, and here's the hardball question. When the current jail was funded, it was projected to be at overcapacity by 2010. It's 2018. Why has it taken 8 years to address this problem?
Well, I think the sheriff appreciates that question because he has been trying since before I was a commissioner, and I've been a commissioner for 10 years now, which is shocking. But no, we know that Sheriff McGovern came to the previous county commission to let them know that overcrowding was going to be a serious problem and that the county commission must address. That was, I started as a commissioner in 2009, so a few years before. He asked for consideration on this, and he was told no, and that's when the reentry program was begun. They funded what has become a very substantial program that helps inmates receive the services they need while they're in jail, and then when they get out of jail, they're less likely to be reincarcerated. So it's a fantastic, actually nationally recognized program now. He came to my commission early on in my tenure with the same request. He said that we are going to have a seriously overcrowded jail, and we need to address it now rather than wait. And what we did, like the former commission, we budgeted more money for the reentry program to double down on what we thought was a way to help keep people out of jail. And so that program is even stronger because of that. We told him no.
Right. But
And the third time, though, 5
Yeah.
years ago, he came to our commission, and the jail was vastly overpopulated, and we knew at that time he couldn't be told no again.
Well,
At some point, you have to face the problem you've
Sure.
got and fix it.
And things have changed
Yeah.
dramatically since
Right.
1994.
Right.
You know, the increase in violent crimes against persons experienced by Douglas County in the past 4 years is 101%. And that's from first blush, that's oh my God, what's going on in Douglas County? But then if you look at the average of the incarceration rates as compared to Kansas or the national average, it's like 55%. I mean, we're not
we're
not just randomly throwing people in jail, are we?
Oh gosh, no. If
Right.
anything, it's the opposite. And that's been a real, it's been difficult to hear the various opposition groups out in the community speaking about mass incarceration in Douglas County, when the fact is we're actually one of the lowest incarceration counties in the nation. Our incarceration rate is about 1.8 people per thousand. If you go across Kansas, you'll find Salina with an incarceration rate of 6 people per thousand. Or a friend of mine was just in New Orleans. Their incarceration rate is 66 per thousand. We don't want to take the mass incarceration conversation lightly, but we need to keep it in context. America has a mass incarceration problem, a serious one, with its federal prisons, with its state prison system, and that's a good fight to have, but it is not our local fight. Douglas County has an extremely low incarceration rate, which means we do not throw people in jail willy-nilly. It's just not the case. And we don't have people in our jail now with who have just a little marijuana in their pocket or parking tickets they haven't
Well, I mean,
paid.
you look at the report from both the sheriff's office and beyond as to who's actually in jail, and as of February 2nd, 193 of these inmates were felony offenders. Only 53 were charged with sentences for misdemeanors, and then you look at the 150 plus that were diverted from jail through the alternative programs that were established to keep people out of jail.
Right.
So it's not a broken system, it's just a crowded facility.
That's the thing. And, we have worked really hard. I give tremendous credit to the sheriff and to the DA and to our courts and to our Criminal Justice Coordinating Council for establishing. We have now about 7 different programs of alternatives to jail and diversions, and we can literally say that. Every nonviolent offender who can be out of jail is.
Well, I mean, you just have to look at the numbers, and it's like running a hotel, okay? There are 186 beds in the jail. There are 193 inmates who are felony offenders and 53 inmates who are misdemeanor offenders. Even if you disregard the misdemeanors, there's not enough room at the end.
Well, and compounded by the fact that although we have 186 bed capacity, the jail is functionally full at 170 because you always, actually 167 to be precise, because you always have to have some empty space in order to move inmates around according to their behavior. If someone in the medium pod suddenly becomes very aggressive, they may have to go to the maximum pod, or vice versa. Someone whose behavior is good, maybe they get a lesser restrictive housing. But best practice is always that you have 10% of your beds available at any time. And so we are functionally very, very full at around 170 inmates.
But you have to, in my opinion, and again, I'm a statistics person.
Yeah.
You look at 1994, when the current jail was paid for, the population, and it's been, and I don't know that everybody realizes it, because I certainly don't, it's been almost 25 years.
Right.
That's a quarter of a century. That's a long period of time. So what has changed? Well, the population of the county has increased substantially.
Right.
Douglas County, Lawrence specifically, fastest growing in Kansas. Number 2 is we have this increase in violent crime. And you add those two things together, and again, there's not enough room at the end.
Right. Well, and I think you always, whenever you talk about this, you always have to remember that this goes beyond Douglas County. We don't check people in at the jail and check their place of residence and say, oh, well, you are from another county, you don't get to stay here. If you commit a crime here,
You go to
stay
jail
here
in Douglas
until
County.
your process is finished. So we are, not only is our county growing dramatically, and we think by another 30 or 40,000 in the next 20 years, both Shawnee County and all of metropolitan Kansas City are growing. And we know for a fact that in the next 20 years, we will have another 500,000 people in this region. And it's important to remember, metropolitan Kansas City on its own is a population of 2.2 million people.
For sure.
So we have our neighboring counties impact our jail. 30% of the people in our jail are not from Douglas County. They are
that
from
was
other
the
places.
statistic that I thought was alarming, is that it's not just the residents of Lawrence and Douglas County. 30% come from other places. But what's even more startling is when you get to a point of saturation like this, and there isn't enough room at the inn, to use my phrase, you have to send them somewhere else, and that's not free. So we're spending over $1 million to outsource 50 to 70 inmates to other jails and other places.
Right. Yeah, at $1.3 million, about 1.1 million of those dollars is just to pay other county jails for room for our inmates. Almost $250,000 is spent on teams of deputies and 3 15-passenger vans who travel the state every day of the week, taking our inmates to other facilities, picking inmates up from those facilities, taking them to court dates. It is a jigsaw puzzle every day, figuring out who has to go where, when they have to be back at court, sometimes in the midst of all that, a county will pick up the phone and call the sheriff and say, you have to come pick up your inmates. We have others we have our own we have to house.
Sure, absolutely.
And so it is, it's a tremendous financial drain on the county.
Well, and that money could be used for other purposes.
That's right. That's money that could be invested in programs, services, or just money not spent on really.
Well, you go back
it's
to
both inefficient and it's also harmful because those inmates who are housed out of county really aren't receiving services that they very much need when they're in jail. So they have the potential to get worse, not better, while they're incarcerated.
Well, and if you look at that money and you think about the things that you had to extract from the sales tax in order to have enough money to fund the mental health campus and the jail, 2 separate projects, those programs could be resurrected and mental health and incarceration are not the only issues we face in Douglas County.
Right. I think, for folks who want us to be fiscally responsible, my response to that is it's not the best use of our money. In fact, it's an unproductive and actually it's a necessary evil right now. We are sending our inmates to other county jails where they don't get the services they need. And the fact of the matter is they come home, they're released into our community, and it's about a 50-50 crapshoot whether they'll commit another crime within a year. And then they come back to jail. So we're just keeping that revolving door of the jail open, and whereas we know if the inmates can be in our facility, can receive the reentry services, about 100 hours of cognitive thinking classes, counseling, as many visits with their social worker as possible before they get out. When we can really intensively pay attention to those people's needs, we know that they get out of our jail into our community and they are much less likely to commit a crime and come back. Our recidivism rate has gone from 30% when we were housing our inmates in our own facility. Now it's up to 45% and rising because the inmates who most benefit from those programs are not in our jail anymore. They're housed in other jails. So we do ourselves a serious disservice, both to those inmates, that impacts their lives.
Sure.
But our community then is more at risk of more crime and spending money in a way that is unproductive.
So a quarter of a century ago, two other people, like you and I, had a conversation about this subject. A quarter century from now, two other people, not you and I, will have the same conversation. We're going to need to expand the jail again. How much time will occur before we have to address this question another time?
Our hope, our aim for this plan is that this jail that we have studied for a long time now, that it will be sufficient for 20 years, maybe more. We have, the thing is that we know that the projections we got from our consultants look forward enough into the future,
Right.
with what we understand about crime rates and patterns right now. This should last for 20 years, but it will only last that long if we also really keep doubling down on all of our programs to help with de-incarceration.
Well,
So,
right.
and that's a good thing. Our Douglas County is constrained to make sure that we keep pushing on the programs for alternatives and diversions. And if we can just get the money to help with all the mental health and substance abuse, both prevention programs as well as crisis and treatment programs, we know that doubling down on all the efforts on that side of the community's needs, is a benefit as well.
Well, and if you think about it from an occupancy rate, okay, and I must confess, I have spent time in the hotel business, and that is how I look at things. Mm-hmm. From an occupancy rate, the lower your occupancy is, the more attention the actual guests who are in the facility will be accorded. So even if we build this expansion and we don't necessarily need all of the space, it, to me, and you tell me if I'm wrong, it means more attention for the inmates who are there and also the possibility to garner revenue from other counties that might need our services. Is that true?
Actually, that is not a direction we would go.
Okay, good.
Because I think there's a fear that if you build it, you will fill it.
So that's not the intention.
No, not at all. Because number one, our desire is to pay attention to serve well the inmates who have to be in our facility. This is not a revenue source for us. This is not a money-making scheme. It costs money to have a jail. The staffing costs, the liability costs, everything that goes into running a jail costs a lot of money. And so this is not opening up more space is not a way to make money. If the county's trying to look for a way to make money,
but the reality
costs a
is
tremendous amount of money.
Sure.
And but what does happen if we can have more space and bring all of our inmates who have to be in our custody, bring them back home to Douglas County, then we could finally have program rooms available for all of the programming, classes, services, counseling that we want to provide. We can finally give our women fair housing, because right now our women are when the jail was designed, they usually only had 6 or 8 women, so they designed a small pod, mixing all of the women inmates together, maximum, medium, minimum, all mixed together. We typically have 40 to 50 women in jail now. And we get as many out as possible with those diversion programs and the alternatives, but still.
And that wasn't a thought back in 1994.
No.
Right.
I mean, this is a different
changed.
era. We have different crime patterns and more violent crime patterns. Less nonviolent crime, more violent crime. It's a very different population in our jail, and so it's just. No, this is not an attempt to get a bigger jail so we can become a for-profit prison system,
right,
which has been one of the claims.
But on the other side of the coin, there's always going to be a need for a jail. There will never be a time where we don't have a jail.
Right. No, I mean, I'd like to think in a perfect world, of course, you wouldn't need a jail, but this isn't a perfect world. And by state statute,
Sure.
every county in America has to provide a public jail, and it has to be governed by the sheriff.
And up
And
to
the-
speed and up to
yeah.
code and
there-
everything that goes
right,
with
there are
it.
statutory requirements as well as constitutional requirements that set standards for the care of the inmates that are housed. And so we are at that point where we question whether we are meeting those standards. And I mean, some people have implied that until we have a lawsuit in front of us, until we have someone telling us we are breaking the law with an insufficient facility or conditions that are too awful, that we should just wait until that time.
Well, that's a very real
and-
concern because in a litigious society, that could be more detrimental to the county than anything
Yeah.
else.
Well, and we have proof both to the west of us and to the east of us that you know, it is true that the Department of Justice does come down hard on counties that don't keep their jail up to standards. And we know that from Shawnee County a number of years ago, and currently from Jackson County to our east. They are in serious trouble with the conditions of our jail. And we're better than that. I mean, why would we wait until we have conditions that are deplorable? We have a clean facility. It just happens to be that when they built it 20 years ago, they did not provide a classification unit, which is the heart of a jail. It's where you figure out, you let people calm down and you see how their behavior is, and you can properly place them in a pod that they will be safe and appropriate to the behavior around
Sure.
them. They didn't build a facility that even considered having very many women in it. They certainly didn't build a facility that had one single soft place in it for folks who are experiencing extra trouble, mental health
Correct.
issues, special needs, issues where they might be bullied, issues where they might be taken advantage
No,
of.
it's about as jail can be.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's not a question of having a facility that's crumbling and falling to the ground. It's a facility that does not meet the needs of the population that it's meant to serve.
Well,
and we want it to be not just meet the minimum standards. We want for people to have every opportunity to get better while they're there, to get counseling, to get encouragement, to have time with people who genuinely, who have professional skills in mental health care. You know, all the things we want for people who are in trouble, the same as we want for people who are outside of the jail, you know, for people who are in a moment of crisis, in a moment of special need, who need, mental health or substance abuse therapy, who just need a safe place. We want that same level of service for the people who are inside our jail as well. And
Absolutely.
we think that they deserve that. And we know that helps our community too, because the people in our county jail, most of them are coming back to live in the community. Most of them are not going on to prison.
Let's get to the bottom line about the jail. The bottom line is it's going to happen anyway. So for the folks that find the concept of jail expansion, or jail-related services to be hard to swallow, it doesn't matter whether this initiative passes or fails, because it's still going to happen. The question, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the real issue is how we're going to fund it. We're going to tack on this half-cent sales tax, which, to me, if I go buy a pack of gum and I have to pay, $1.26 rather than $1.25, I'm not going to be as annoyed by that as if I get my property tax bill and it's significantly higher.
Right, and that's a good point, because we worked long and hard trying to figure out how to get both of these big projects done and in the least painful funding way we could. Honestly, we thought that this would be something that would be put on property tax. We never thought this would be a sales tax initiative, but when it all was added up, what we realized is that we would be talking about an 11 mil increase on the property tax, which would have translated to about 25% increase in your Douglas County property tax.
I'm sorry, Nancy, that's a hard pill to swallow.
And that
for
would
anybody.
have been if folks are uncomfortable with the property tax raises in the last 10 years,
right?
That would have been just about all 10 years combined, happening all at once. So an 11 mil increase in your property tax would have been a hard pill to swallow. And the sales tax has another angle to it that we think is helpful. It is 50 cents on every $100 purchase. And we're not saying that sales tax is an easy avenue either.
Right.
We have high sales tax in this.
But the good news is that we don't all, as Douglas County residents, we're not bearing the entire burden ourselves, because there are people who come here all the time to visit.
That's right. We have hundreds of thousands of people more.
There are more people who come here than live here.
Right. We have a lot of people who come and spend their money freely here, and we want those people to come here and do that. But we also like to have them leave behind some money to help us pay for the burden of the jail population that we, by state statute, have to take care of and take care of well. So 30% of the people in our jail come from other communities, come from other counties. A lot of people from other counties come to our community and spend money. Levying a sales tax helps them help us pay for the inmates that we are charged to care for. So it's it spreads the burden, and we think that's a good idea.
Now
let me get to
Sure.
you raised the issue of, well, this is going to happen anyway. Let me talk about that just a little bit more, because the county commission did decide that the jail expansion is necessary. If this referendum doesn't pass, we asked for a phased construction plan to help us understand how long it would take to build the jail in phases, and how much the county would have to spend per phase to accomplish that. Because the only way to get the entire facility built all at once is to take on the debt, to have a debt service, like paying a mortgage on a house.
Absolutely.
If we're able to take on the debt so that we can pay a yearly service on the debt, we can get the jail built in 3 years' time, and we can get that through this sales tax. $3 million would go to the debt payment, and $1 million goes to a portion of the operations cost. If we are to have to build this on in a phased approach, then that means we have to do it by cash, on a cash pay-as-you-go basis. That means that for several years at a time, we would have to gather up about $4.5 million. We'd have to find that money from within our own budget, because again, we're not getting to take on debt. We're having to pay cash, and so we have to find that cash somewhere. We would.
And doesn't that mean that something's going to suffer?
That means looking into our budget to see where we can gather up about $4.5 million every year for several years until we can afford the first phase of the expansion.
You know, I've looked around my house for extra cash, and the most I've ever come up with is $6.
Yeah.
So good luck.
We believe that it would gathering up that $4.5 million would take the form of looking into our budget and making cuts, some cuts to our capital improvement plan, cuts to economic development, and cuts to some social services. We currently spend around $9 million on social services in Douglas County, some of which is necessary and mandatory, much of which is not. And we do it because it's the right thing to do. Our community needs to have a strong social service net. And with the state defunding social services dramatically, we have stepped in to try and bolster those services. So the intention isn't to shut down every social service agency in the community, but the intention is to see where we can find that $4.5 million to get a pool of money to pay on a pay-as-you-go basis to get that first phase of the jail built. So it would take
a lot longer to get it done, right?
The phased construction plan says it would take 16 years to complete this jail.
So by the time you're done, you're going to need to do something else.
Well, that's the great irony. So to do this on a cash basis, rather than get the permission to do it all at once with this sales tax, will take about 16 years. It will cause the county to have a much harsher budget when it comes to services that we like to help provide. And in the meantime, we haven't solved our crowding problem. We haven't been able to bring our inmates home back to Douglas County. So we're still paying $1.3 million to house them out of county while we're waiting for this phased construction. We'll still have women in this insufficient pod. We'll still be mixing violent folks with nonviolent folks. We will still experience all the problems we're having now, and compounded by an increasingly difficult problem that we face at the jail.
So if I go to Weaver's and I purchase $100 worth of goods and services, then it's going to be $100.50. Is that correct?
Well, it'll be 50 cents added on to the sales tax that you would be paying.
Right. So $100 plus tax plus 50 cents.
Yes, right.
Okay.
So, and with that 50 cents, not only are you allowing us to get the jail expanded within 3 years' time, so that all of these issues are addressed, taken care of, and we're helping both people inside the jail and outside the jail. You're also getting, by the way, more than half of that 50 cents is dedicated to the mental health side of the equation.
That's what I want to talk about next.
Much more.
Let's talk about Bert Nash and the impact that Bert Nash has had on the community for the last 24 years. Why is Bert Nash so important to Douglas County?
It is an anchor. It is our community mental health service agency, which every county, by the way, every county has the statutory obligation to provide access to mental health care.
What does that language mean, access?
Well, that's the thing, is that access can mean that a county provides a way for a person to get to some kind of mental health appointment, or even a facility not in that county. It just has to provide some kind of gateway to care. In Douglas County, we have not only a mental health agency that we call Bert Nash, but we have a wonderful facility. We have a deep bench of professional counselors and pretty robust programming for the entire community. And beyond that, pretty good services out in the community. But we do know that it's not sufficient to the needs of the community. Bert Nash's budget has been cut dramatically by the state, and we've tried to backfill some of that, but they've suffered greatly, as has every other community.
Well, both at the federal and the state level, right?
It's at a time when we've needed mental health and substance abuse services most of all. That's the time when we've seen those dramatic cuts, decreases to services, and it's not just Bert Nash. It's our all of the service agencies out there are scrambling to get the resources they need to meet people's.
So this is what we call
problems.
A health leadership coalition, which includes Lawrence Memorial Hospital, Lawrence Douglas County Health Department, the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority, Heartland, which is the recent merger of Heartland and Healthcare Access, both the Regional Alcohol and Drug Assessment Center and the Community Health Center, DECA, DCC, CA, and Bert Nash. It's not just Bert Nash.
Right. It's much, much more than Bert Nash. And honestly, that's been one of the most amazing things to watch in the last couple of years, where we've gone from agencies who were working largely in silos, and sometimes with some sense of territoriality because funding is so difficult, to now this Health Leadership Council is what we call this group of CEOs from all of those agencies who not only want to work together, but they already are working together, and they are in fact in each other's business now, seeing where they can share resources, where they can share staff, where they can build new programs and improve programs. And it's been a phenomenal turnaround in terms of the very kind of collaborative efforts that people want to see, finding efficiencies, finding ways to improve services. This is an effort that I've never seen before. The level of collaboration, the level of goodwill, the level of really hard study, and a lot of introspection, a lot of reflection on how can we do things better. We see that from the hospital standpoint in their willingness to bring in a special team of mental health crisis counselors. A special team is in the emergency room now because of the county's work helping put this together to make sure that folks who come to the hospital's emergency department in mental health crisis have a better experience, have an opportunity to be surrounded by extra levels of care.
Well, and you think about the needs. We kind of have this dubious distinction of being America's #1 party college town. And with that, comes alcohol and marijuana. But at the same time, if you look at the statistics, assault, battery, and domestic battery, rank the highest among the felony inmates that are in the prison today. So this
jail. Not a prison.
Jail. Correct. That are in the jail today. So this county crisis center that is proposed is not just for drug addicts and alcoholics, right?
Oh gosh, no. And thank you for asking. That's a real misconception. Number one, we'll just say it again. This mental health crisis center is not located at the jail. It is not a law enforcement facility. It would be located across the street from Burt Nash, catty corner to the hospital. It will have 2 entrances. One is a public entrance for anyone in the community to bring their loved one, to walk in on their own.
And would that be a 24-hour?
24 hours a day, every day of the year.
Because, for some reason, crises seem to happen between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m.
And that's a tremendous frustration that we have right now, is that we know that. And yet we don't have the ability to manage a 24-hour-a-day crisis, except for someone just going to the emergency room, which is, thank heavens they're there, but that's not necessarily where that person needs to be.
And it's not the best place either for them or for the others who are there.
No, we can do better than that. Both the hospital's needs, but mostly for the community's needs. Sometimes what you need is not hospital level care, but a safe place to go where you'll be surrounded by professional mental health.
And you'll receive prioritization, because if you go to the emergency room and you're having, pardon the expression, no disrespect, a meltdown, and there's a gunshot wound ahead of you, guess who's going to get the attention? It's going to be the gunshot wound.
Well, yes and no. I have to say that the hospital, because of the county's work and this whole collaborative team, we do now have a team embedded in the emergency department that is specifically meant to address and prioritize those folks who come in with mental health crises. So I think that folks are going to find that they are more prioritized at this point and set apart in a way from the rest of the melee of the emergency department. So I don't want to diminish the efforts there.
Sure.
But there's a place, there's a good reason to have a separate crisis facility, because it is a way of you would walk in the door of the crisis center and be greeted by someone who can take you to who can triage. take you to a 23-hour stabilization room that's quiet, calm, where you're evaluated. You can be talked with, peer support. Folks can sit with you, and just kind of be calmed and evaluated for what the actual need is and what the next step might be. Maybe that's all. Maybe a person just needs a couple of hours.
Well, and time is a critical issue because unlike other types of maladies, longer recovery periods are sometimes necessary, whether you're on suicide watch or there's any other type of mental health trauma. You can't say, well, you know what, you've got 15 minutes to get it together.
Right.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Mental Health Crisis Center, what we like to say is it buys time. Mm-hmm. It buys time for someone who is in one of the worst moments of their lives, possibly. It surrounds them with professional people who know what to do in that moment. And it allows a 23-hour kind of calming stabilization unit. If that person simply just needs to sober up in a safe place, there's a sobering unit. If they are in trouble because they are high, because they've got an issue with drug addiction or abuse, some kind of substance abuse, we will offer, finally, this has never been offered in this community in the way we intend to, medication-assisted drug detox, both for men and women. So medication-assisted detox is a much less painful, nauseating, distressing way to let that drug get out of your system. It needs to be supervised by professional people, and we will have those people there, thanks to Heartland Radak. But if a person hasn't suffered throughout their entire detox time, which is usually about 3 days, then they're much more likely at the end of that third day to say, when the moment is in front of them, the opportunity to go into treatment, to seek help with their addiction problem, they're much more likely to say yes, because they haven't just gone through literal hell getting the drug out of their system. They haven't been nauseated. They haven't been in pain. They haven't been miserable in detox. And beyond that, I'll just finish by saying, beyond that, if they need a few more days, even after that, just to get their life sorted out, where they're going to go next, do they go home to a drug-selling boyfriend, or do we help them find a different place to go?
Well, and that's why I wanted to ask. In the recovery campus, we see 3 tiers.
Right.
Tier 1, 2, and then something called Tier 3 apartments. What are those tiers, and what is the time involved?
That might be the most exciting thing about this plan for the Mental Health Crisis Center really evolved over the last couple of years because of the help of all of those community health partners. Once they got onto the scene, what we realized is that having a mental health crisis center just all by itself really wasn't going to address the larger needs of these folks. What you have to undergird the entire system with is housing. So in this, it's called a housing first philosophy, that we know for a fact that we can pour tons of money into someone with social services, but if they don't have a place to call home where they feel safe and secure and have some privacy, they're not likely to be helped. They're not likely to
because old
recover.
Behavior will creep back in.
They'll either go back to the homeless shelter, they'll go back to the street, they'll go back to a living situation with a spouse who might get them right back into their substance abuse issues. So this is a campus now. It's not just a crisis center.
Right.
So we have 3 tiers of housing. The first tier is very, very temporary. It's giving a person maybe another 7 to 10 days to be inside that crisis center facility, to get their living arrangements sorted out. If they want to go to treatment, to buy them some time while we find a place for them to be in substance abuse treatment for their future recovery. if they need help getting signed up for other services, getting connected to their case managers, it just buys some
Right.
time. The second tier of housing would be very much kind of home-like for 12 to 14 people. Tier 2 housing would provide up months, maybe up to a year of supportive housing. So mental health professionals inside that house helping folks get used to their new circumstances, where maybe if they are on some medication for mental illness, maybe if they are needing time to get used to being on certain services and certain patterns of life. This helps them spend those months getting used to this different kind of life that they are going to want to live and need to live in order to be happy and healthy and productive. And then the next level of housing is Tier 3, we're calling it. It's actually already funded, $2 million of federal funding devoted to building 10 apartments that will, if a person is qualified, they might live in the rest of their lives. And these are reserved for the folks who have the most difficulty finding housing, the folks who, but for this program, would probably be on the streets.
I see.
And so, but these would also be supported housing. They would also be connected to services. And while this sounds like an expensive scheme, the fact is it saves money. Because we begin to see folks not relying on services and the revolving door of services that cost sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year per person. Instead, they have secure housing, they have appropriate services, and they have every opportunity that they need to try and find some normalcy, find some consistency, find some peer support. Super excited about our peer support program. And this is just a drop in the bucket. This is not going to solve every problem we have out there, but this is a really
no panacea.
Right. This is a good, strong beginning, and this we think provides a model for not just for now, but for future commissions, future generations that really invest in programs that are integrated with partners that are working closely together, and to find efficiencies, to find innovations, to find ways to really move the needle.
Well, and the one thing that strikes me, and you can tell me if I'm off base or not, is when we think about alternatives to reduce our jail population, and we look at the folks who are in jail, and we look at 39 assault, battery, domestic battery, 30 distribution or possession of opiates and heroines, 25 aggravated assault and battery, and you go down 4 rape. A lot of this says mental health to me. So by having access to mental health facilities and more aggressive treatment, wouldn't we at the same time potentially be creating a model that could reduce our jail population for those specific things? Possibly.
Well, I think we have to be very careful going down that road of thinking, because you never want to assume criminality with mental health. That's a very unfair linkage to make, because we suffer from from jumping too quickly to that conclusion.
Okay.
However, and we do know for a fact that communities that have mental health crises centers, some in the beginning the thought was, if we can just build a crisis center, then we will solve so many problems that we will empty out our jails. We won't see people going to jail because we will have addressed the mental health issues. We will have addressed.
Well, there will always be people going to jail.
The thing is, I think that we will improve the quality of life for people in our community, not just with the crisis center, but with more wraparound services, much more emphasis on preventive services, much more ability to get people into recovery, not just once, but twice and 3. How many times does it take sometimes for someone to successfully change their life and go on a more healthy course. It's a lifetime of recovery. Emphasizing and funding, finally really robustly funding all of this will absolutely help our community be safer, more secure, have the better chance of helping people before they get into trouble.
Right.
But this is not a panacea for our overcrowded jail. We know that the statistics show that this will barely move the needle on the jail population. But it's still the right thing to do. It's absolutely the right thing to do. Expanding our county jail to solve current problems of overcrowding and current problems of recidivism that comes with overcrowding and the sense of it not being a safe and secure facility for the folks who have to be there, the inmates or staff. We need to address that both for now, but for the next 20 years. But the mental health side of it, we need to do as well. So it's not either or. One doesn't fix the other. Both and is an appropriate approach.
How long has the Douglas County Commission been studying this problem, these issues?
Well, really with intensity for 5 years now.
Right.
Again, it came up before our commission early on in my time, so probably 9 years ago we started talking about it, and we just doubled down on the reentry program like the previous commission. But when the sheriff came to us the third time with great urgency, because it wasn't speculation anymore, it was reality. The jail was not just overcrowded, it was overflowing. We had to pay attention. We had to take seriously our obligation to run that jail in a way that met all sorts of levels of obligation we have. So 5 years ago, we started in earnest to try and understand that.
Based on those facts and based on your personal commitment to uphold your duty to serve the citizens of Douglas County, I'm just going to ask you flat out. Is Proposition 1, is this the right way to go? Is this the best plan to address these issues, in your opinion?
Well, I certainly haven't held back on that. I believe that Proposition 1 is a best effort on our part to offer the community both an appropriate funding stream that would get our jail expanded within 3 years and get our mental health crisis center in campus and programs done in 2 years' time. And it's a both and solution for us, and it is largely funded by this half-cent sales tax. So yes, I think this is a very, very strong proposition for the community to consider, and I would hope folks would, they can go to our website and see more into the weeds information.
Sure, that's douglascountyks.org, douglascountyks.org.
And I'm, all I do anymore all day long is have cups of coffee with people or speak to groups, and that's true for my colleagues on the commission as well, Mike Gaughan and Michelle DeRusso, and members of the county staff and all of our health partners. We're all out talking to as many people as we can, and I welcome any invitation to coffee or to speak to any group, because it's a steep hill to climb. Educating on this is complicated, and it really deserves more than a soundbite. So, Jay, I'm really grateful to you for giving a lot of time and attention to this, and another chance to educate.
We've spent the last hour talking with County Commissioner Nancy Thellman about Proposition 1. The county clerk will mail ballots to active registered voters on April 25th. And these ballots must be returned by 12 noon on May 15th. You can return the ballots in person by going to the courthouse. You can return the ballots by mail, and that's how you do it.
Right. Yes. No, there's no polling on this. No going to your usual election poll place. It's strictly a mail ballot election.
Yep. And if this is an issue that you feel is important to you, pay attention to the mail because it's coming in just a couple of days. Nancy Thellman, thank you for taking time to talk to us about this issue today, and thank you for listening. This has been an hour conversation on Proposition 1 with County Commissioner Nancy Thellman. I'm Jay Wachs on LawrenceHits.com.